Who are you? Who are you really? Not who do you think you are, who have you been told you are, but who are you really? One of the things I do that I'll tell you about from the journey is we go to the Ganges, and I take them to Varanasi. Now, Varanasi is a place in the Ganges where the Indians believe if you come to the Ganges in this particular place and you are buried there and your ashes are scattered in the Ganges, then you don't have to take rebirth again. So we go to the Ganges River, and there's a particular place on the banks of the Ganges, overlooking the Ganges in Varanasi, where they are burning dead bodies 24 hours a day for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, non-stop. So if you imagine walking into a town and the whole town smells kind of strange. And you walk into a town and there's a particular area where you see this going on. So I take my client there and we sit there. And it's incredible because you'll see a dead body that maybe has been gone about 2 days, and it's put on a piece of wood. And the wood is then lit. The priest then goes around the wood and maybe says the last rites and prayers. And then I sit there with my client and I then sit there and we watch the body burning. And I want you to just imagine that for a moment. Here is a body, hands, eyes, feet, toes, laid across wood. It's then lit on fire from the head. And over the next 2 hours, slowly, you see the head dissolving. And then you see the neck dissolving. And then you see all sorts of things spewing out. And then the shoulders dissolving. And then the hands dissolving. And then it just, before you know it, within about 2 hours, you finally see the toes sizzling and dissolving. And within a couple of hours, the entire body that was once there is gone. And it really starts to point to this question: in who are you really? You see, after watching a body burn with your own physical eyes and seeing this body burn, you realize that you cannot just be this body. And so often, we've gotten identified and attached to being this body, to being this name. I am Kute, I am Mike, I am Felicia, I am John, I am Victoria, I am whatever your name might be. We've gotten identified to being this form. And we have an identity about who we are and who we think we are. But when you see this body burn, you realize you cannot just be the body. So the question I pose to my clients really is, who are you? Who are you really? Where do you exist? You know, in the self-help movement, there's a phrase of, you have to find yourself. Well, I ask my clients, well, have you tried to find yourself lately? Take a look. Where are you located? Where is this thing called you that you think you are? And I ask them to look. You might do that right now. Take a look. Where are you? And often they point to the body. And they point to their hands. They point to their heart. They point to their mind. So I then ask them, well, if I were to crack your head open for a moment and we were to put a microscope inside of your head, would we find you inside of your mind? What we would end up finding is some flesh. What we would end up finding is a brain, some gray matter. So they might point to their heart. And they say, well, this is who I am. And I say, well, if we were to slice that open, would we find you sitting in there looking back? And as we go through these questions in this process, we begin to realize that what you are is beyond just this form, is beyond just this name. I give my clients this analogy, and it goes something like this. Imagine for a moment you got hit on the head. And for a moment, you lost your memory completely. Your memory was gone. It had totally dissolved. And you woke up in the hospital room. And in the hospital room, you woke up and you had no idea who you were or what you were. Where is the you that you previously thought that you were? Where does this you exist? You see, I would then, let's say I walked into this hospital room in that moment, as the doctor. And I said, my name's Dr. Blackson. And I walked in there with my white coat, and I let you know that you had an accident and you lost your memory, but everything was going to be okay, and your name was Jim or Jane, assuming that's not your real name. And I told you this was what your name actually was. What would you say? What could you say? I mean, really, if you really lost your memory in that moment, you wouldn't really know. You wouldn't know if that was really your name or not. See, I like to say that ultimately we can't really know anything for sure. I mean, we think we're sure about many things. We think we're sure about who we are. We think we're sure about who we're not. We think we're sure about this is what I believe. And I say, well, you can't really know anything for sure. Because in that moment of losing your memory, who you thought you were, what you thought you were called, the religion that you thought you were, and all these beliefs you may have thought you had, probably wouldn't be there. You'd just be sitting there. The only thing in that moment that you could know for sure, for absolute sure, you see, all those things, your name, where you were born, many of those things you've been told. You've been told by someone else, this is who you are. And we then end up believing that, and from that place we live our life, and from that place we create our life. So I often say the only thing you could know for sure in that moment, for absolutely sure, is you would look around, and you would look around the room, and you may not know what your name was or what your age was necessarily, but you would look around the room and you could at least have an awareness of, I am here, I am in the room, I am. But I am Jane, or I am Jim, or I am Mike. That you couldn't know for sure. But what you can know for sure as direct experience in that moment is, I am. I'm here. So the only thing you could know for sure in that hospital room is you may not know your name, you may not know where you're from. You see, I could come and tell you, well, you're from Las Vegas, and you're married to, your husband is from Ethiopia, and you have 12 children. Now, it might be a bizarre story, but you wouldn't know for sure. See, I like to say that most of the things we think we know about ourselves are just stories. Some are good stories, some aren't so great stories, some are empowering stories, some are disempowering stories. But they're stories, because the moment you lose your memory, they're gone. The only thing you would know for sure in that moment is you may not know your name, you may not know your age, you may not even know who your husband or your wife or your mother is. But the only thing you can know for sure from your direct experience is you look around. And you could say, I am. But I am Jane, or I am this type of person, or I am that type of person, or I am whatever else it is you may have made up in your mind about yourself. You could not know that for sure. So those are just stories, and those are just identities. So one of the things that I work with when I take people to India, and even in my work, is to really move you beyond. Move beyond the story or the identity that you've been given, that someone's given you, that's been conditioned, so that you can really get in touch with who you are beyond the story, who you are in your real and pure essence. And that's the real power of the process of the liberation experience.